Welcome to LogiQ-On Talking Tech, the podcast where we interview business leaders and experts in retail and supply chain. Join us as we dive deep into the technology making a difference on the day-to-day within businesses in Australia, and we learn from the insights and lessons of the experts that we speak to. I'm Simon Wile. Let's get started. Thanks for joining us on LogiQ-On Talking Tech. I'm your host, Simon Wile, and today we are interviewing Glenn Keast, founder and owner of Orchard Retail Group. Glenn is a retail and industry veteran, having spent 17 and a half years at Cotton On Group, finishing as their COO, and has now opened his retail consultancy group, Orchard Retail Group. Glenn, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Simon.
Glenn, before we dig into the start of your career, let's talk about the current. Tell us about Orchard and what you do.
I suppose Orchard was a business that I started in July last year. I probably had given it some thought over a few years as to what my next steps were going to be, and I probably think about sort of my time at Cotton On was probably exposed in two different halves in many ways. The first half was exponential growth, lots of sort of crazy things in terms of once in a career opportunities sort of happening, sort of felt like month after month. And then probably the second half of my time at Cotton On was sort of maturing the business and I suppose putting in, best practice processes and trying to develop systems and methodologies to sort of see the business continue to growth. Those two phases were probably something that I sort of went, how do I combine those two things and have the fun and excitement of growth, but also, use some of my experience that was gained over a long period of time to help other retailers grow and become more efficient were probably the two key things.
Right. So the Orchard's mission is to help new retailers sort of find their feet in the world?
Yeah, I think certainly not just exposing ourselves to new and small retailers, but sort of everywhere from those startup businesses right through to mature businesses that are needing sort of support and efficiency. So enjoying sort of the exposure across the board, actually.
Diversity is the spice of life.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Glenn, you joined Cotton On during an explosive growth phase and taking it all the way through to the household name that we know now. Tell us about the early days and getting started.
Yeah, early days, I suppose I go back to my first memory was meeting the CEO, Peter Johnson, and then sort of the founder, Nigel Austin, and his cousin, Ash Hardwick. Probably met them over probably about a month period in early 2007. And was sort of exposed to their thinking in terms of growth, and that was about adding brands and adding sort of markets because they'd started to get to a bit of a phase in Australia where they could see the growth was going to slow down. I think everyone sort of that joined Cotton On at that sort of period knew how many stores the business had at that time. The business was judged on how many stores that it had open. Basically was able to join at a pretty exciting period of time. I think there was 70 people in head office in our support centre at the time. And I think there's 2 people in IT. So you sort of got to know everybody quite quickly in terms of the business. Was able to join at a pretty exciting time where I think we had a few years in a row where we're opening 100 stores in 100 days, sort of in the lead up to Christmas. I think certainly 2 years in a row where we tried to achieve that goal.
That's phenomenal. I mean, there's very few brands in Australia that have achieved the growth that Cotton On Group have. I mean, I think everyone in Australia would know who the brand is or have one locally in their mall or shop. So certainly that awareness of brand would have been front of mind. Was that part of the reason for joining? You knew the brand beforehand?
I obviously lived in Geelong, so I knew the brand. I didn't realise the sort of scale that the business already had, but certainly didn't realise the growth aspirations that the business had, which was exciting to sort of be able to work and live in Geelong, where I'd been travelling to Melbourne for sort of the previous 8 years for my career. So it was an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, nice to stay close to home.
Yeah.
And so how did you get started growing from that 2007 point with 2 people in the IT team?
Look, I think the business was a very stores business at that point. So it was really all about growing store footprint. So in many ways, it was getting that capability of building and developing stores. Whether that store was in South Australia or Victoria or WA, being able to do and execute that really well was a big thing. The distribution capability obviously was a bit of an engine behind that, and so that was my primary responsibility at that time, was to set that up. And yeah, probably from that moment onwards, the sort of business became more complex as we added stores, but also added countries, so different distribution points. And then I think from around about sort of 2010, we started e-commerce, which again added another channel to the mix. And then probably as the business matured and became multi-channel or omni-channel, that created the complexity. But early days, it was actually a reasonably simple business in terms of becoming really good at opening stores was the primary focus of the business.
Yeah, right. And just drive that national awareness by being everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so mapping that out in terms of every store needs this sort of fixture and this sort of paint and this sort of, and just modelling that template everywhere, or was there more detailed than that?
No, I think, like the store fit out was, something that when I first started, it was fairly basic, but became really good. And that sort of in-store experience, these days the stores are super quality. And that matured over time, and we're able to sort of, add quality but also reduce the price of the fit out accordingly over time was a primary focus of the business, so that, we could rinse and repeat to some degree.
Yeah, right. So making sure that it's not only quality but it's on brand, has the same fixtures and fittings, and staff are able to move around in a familiar way.
Yeah, and I think, creating that experience for the consumer that, that came into the store was pretty important, to be able to, navigate the store, find what they want to find in an effective way, able to sort of have the right customer experience from a people point of view in the store as well.
I'm curious how you go about designing a store from a people point of view. Like, is there someone's role who's specifically like, okay, we'll put the change rooms over there and we'll put the T-shirts over there? How do you pull all that together in a cohesive way that makes it a good experience for a customer?
I think it's the experience is actually that. So it is people knowing and understanding how those things work, and a mall might be different to the next mall. So and a footprint's always slightly different. So being able to understand where the counter should go, and we've probably gotten on over the time and had lots of opportunities to sort of get that right. So it's the continuous sort of improvement cycle. Getting better at those things, where the change rooms go, how many change rooms, all those sort of things. The businesses over time has evolved and become quite good at those things.
Right. And so as you've opened up this store network that's grown massively over the years, then seen the rise of e-com, click and collect, the stores would have had to pivot each time to accommodate that change.
Yeah, I think stores and the supply chain. So definitely have had to evolve with the demands of the consumer customer over the time. So the store, whether that's, being able to service a click and collect customer, being able to do that efficiently, different markets have different appetite for those types of things as well. So whether the store's in Southeast Asia or, at Chadstone, it's going to be potentially a different, slightly different solution.
Right. And so Cotton's on the rocket ship. You're growing year on year, opening 100 shops, and everyone's just hanging on. How do you implement new systems and make sure that everything sort of holds together when you're on such a rocket?
Yeah, I don't. I think we would probably, looking back in terms of, we didn't go out looking for new systems. We were pretty much resigned to the systems we had were the ones that we were going to use. We also, where we had to, we implemented different solutions. So we implemented Manhattan WMS. That was a positive step. We probably went through a bit of pain in the first instance, but certainly being able to achieve an omni experience was possible through that implementation.
Right.
So we certainly had an attitude of we'd deliver the things that we needed to, but we're quite good at being able to focus in on what was going to deliver the growth and really focus on those things. So whether that was a new market and setting up our people and team to be able to deliver a new market, then that's what we'd focus on. So rather than making it perfect along the way, we would focus on the growth and use that as the driving force.
Yeah, right. And so once, I guess, the growth is achieved, I mean, businesses are always growing and changing, but you've grown to a point now where you've got an IT department of 75, managing multiple countries, e-commerce. When do you stop and go, maybe should have a look at how this is all going and think about what comes next?
Yeah, I think around about 2015 we started having a few moments of where's the business going, what's the growth, the advent of multiple channel. So we certainly had some challenges from a system point of view. We'd added quite a few things in. I think my count when I first took on IT, we had 105 applications that we counted. So we'd sort of developed our own ecosystem of developing solutions. And we sort of set ourselves a goal of having, I think it was 12 key core systems.
Right.
So we started trying to basically navigate back to those core systems where a process should live and building it in the appropriate solution and or investing in the right solution. So, that was an interesting sort of phase. And, I think when I left, I don't think we'd got to our 12 core systems as being the only applications in the business, but I think we were down to about 27, something like that. So we'd made some serious inroads.
Yeah, well, it's a remarkable reduction of 70 systems down to a reduction of 70 systems. So, I imagine the administrative overhead of that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And your ability to execute and make change became far more agile.
So moving through that rationalisation period, you must have taken, I guess, that top-down look at the business and gone, well, this is where we want to go and how we're going to get there. What did you learn?
What did I learn? I suppose, the ultimate goal would be not to get into that position. But I certainly understand how that happened because our focus was growth. And I think in the case of a lot of retailers, that becomes the focus. And often a founder or an owner is very led by by what they know and their product and their brand, and so certainly that will drive all the things that in terms of behaviours and opportunities. I think for me, being able to try to fix it along the way or being able to not take missteps along the way is ultimately where the perfect world sits, knowing that it'll never be perfect. But certainly having an eye on the future and having, I suppose, something, that people would talk about being a roadmap or something that you're adhering to along the journey. And then certainly getting some advice along the way to be able to make those decisions in a conscious way. Our board, when we did get to a level of maturity, were quite good at focusing on, their advice was often focus on the biggest bit of the biggest bit. So we would focus on what was really going to materially make a difference. And I suppose then we did start to get into a level of maturity of what a roadmap might look like. So I think, as I said, what the question was, what I learned. The quicker you can get into sort of having a structured sort of way of applying technology and processes, the better. Doesn't have to be, perfect, and it doesn't have to be, best practice. But I think sort of having an eye on the future, which is challenging, is certainly a way to go. And I'd encourage, people in that space to reach out if they need some support, because there's plenty of people out there that have lived the journey, and I think understanding others' stories is really important so that you can get help along the way.
I couldn't agree more. Like storytelling is a great way to share experiences and wisdom. Just as you were speaking, I was thinking, Cotton On, massive company. At what point do you now, as a consultant, consider a business mature?
That's a good question. I think it can vary. I think depends on sort of your customer base, your market. If you're only going to, you're only looking to grow into a single market, or you're best of breed in terms of what you do. So I think it can vary. It's hard to know to say at this point you need to start behaving differently because you're now mature. It doesn't happen like that. So
Not like turning 18?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they give you a license to go, you're now a mature business. So I think it's being able to sort of take that journey, take some steps towards it, in terms of, whether that's external thinking, giving yourself some time. I think that's often one of the biggest challenges, particularly in small businesses that are growing fast. There's just the focus is on the now, and so it's being able to have some time and space to think differently, and that could be something as simple as that.
Yeah. So almost at a reflection point in the business of having that awareness of we've been scrambling. Hey, let's take a step and think about how we're going to do things now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Glenn, my personal passion is RFID, so I was always going to ask you about this. Cotton On's a massive business with a lot of inventory. Why no RFID?
Yeah, it's a good question, and certainly something that I think we've probably visited, around the table. I'll say at least half a dozen times in my time at Cotton On, and I think everybody is genuinely a believer, which is the sort of silly thing of that it hasn't happened.
Right.
And so I think, initially it was probably cost. I think probably, as I said, one of the focuses that the board were really big on me over my time leading technology was focus on the biggest bit of the biggest bit. So it sort of never got to that stage of,
Right.
Being the thing to go fix. I think at some point it will, because it'll drive a return on investment, and I think then there will be obviously all the other benefits that flow from that. So I think it will happen. It's just a matter of when, not if. And I think it'll deliver a lot of benefit to a business like Cotton On that have got a large store footprint with lots of inventory in lots of different locations that would benefit from understanding that.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. I think of them quite often when I think of a business that would really get a lot out of it. Just reasonably good sized store footprint with a lot of stock. It would go a long way. But was curious for your opinion and insight on that. I have these conversations with retailers all the time, and it's often we like it, we're into it, but it's not top of the list. And so my challenge is always trying to push it to the top of the list.
Yeah, for sure.
Glenn, so after experiencing all that growth and change at Cotton On for nearly 18 years, what was the decision point that made you go, I'm going to go out on my own here and open a consultancy?
It's a good question, and I sort of reflect on it often. And I think I probably knew through COVID that I was going to do something different, at the back of COVID, and none of us knew what was going to be ahead of us at that period of time. I had a bit of a life moment through that COVID period in terms of health. So I had a cardiac arrest.
Wow.
And probably got to spend some time working on the business at the back of that. So when I sort of came back to work, sort of got the opportunity to, I'll say in a way, sort of consult, because I was sort of out of the daily operations and was, I suppose, building our network strategy, where we consolidated, I think, from 14 stock holding points down to 7. And that sort of took me through to sort of June 2024, so in terms of executing that plan.
Right.
And so probably through that sort of period of time, I started thinking what would be next. And I really sort of, as I've said to often people when I'm talking to them, in the first intro as a consultant, I sort of talk about my time at Cotton On being sort of 2 phases: the early part, growth, high pace, lots of, crazy opportunities that come along, once every month or seem to come along every month. And then the second part was maturing the business. So I really wanted to focus on probably those two aspects and the experience that I'd obviously drawn on over a period of time. So felt like, growth and, efficiency were the two things that I really wanted to start a business doing. Initially, I thought it would be me, in a fractional COO type situation. But I quickly sort of worked out that I had more work than I could probably handle myself. And I needed to build a team of people that could support me on that journey. It was a great problem to have. And as I said, I never really thought that was going to be the case. And there's probably better people that can do that work than me as well. So it was, for me, I needed to build the capability to sort of fill that demand. So it's been great. I've enjoyed the experience, loved listening to people's stories, startup businesses right through to mature businesses that have, circumstantially had to do different things. So helping them on their journey of change management or transformation has been good fun.
Right, so you're working at both ends of town with the startups with the scrappy energy and the mature retailers who maybe are going through an acquisition or a consolidation and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and doing all things in between. So and that's driving a great deal of energy. I feel excited for that. And I think excited because you genuinely believe that you can help people, whether that's moving a warehouse and got a really rock solid sort of playbook on how to move a warehouse. Done it numerous times. Things like as simple as that.
Yep.
But for that person at that time, that's a big move.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming,
and it can be catastrophic for businesses if they don't get that right. So investing in that is really important. And being able to work on lots of different projects, whether it's implement an S&OP process. So the variation in work is exciting as well.
Yes. Yeah. Keeping it varied is, like you say, keeps it fresh, keeps it exciting. There's always something new to learn or play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And so you've built the team up now. How many are in your team?
We've got 6 in terms of people, 6 in Australia, but we've started Orchard US late last year. So Brent Ilgen heads up our US operation. So Brent was my first ever Cotton On DC employee in LA back in the day. So Brent and I met in a lobby of a hotel many years ago as his first interview, and he's finished up late last year where he was working and said, we'd just been talking and said, look, let's start up the US. So obviously we've, one of the things that we have pitched as part of Orchard Retail Group is helping businesses grow internationally. So whether that's an Australian retailer that wants to grow into the US, we've got a really strong playbook of how to do that.
Great.
The states of America are all different.
Yes.
So different rules and regulations and how to open in each of the different markets. So Brent is there to support businesses that want to grow into the US. And I had a bit of a break in Europe this year and caught up with a lady called Claire Pearson. Claire was the DC manager in Southeast Asia, based in Singapore for me, for Cotton On. She's been back in the UK 11 years and then just finished up recently at TK Maxx. So we started Orchard UK with essentially the same sort of in terms of journey, the same sort of path of how we want to operate that. So so certainly nothing like I expected would happen. And I think, I just think about the thing that sort of stood true is those relationships over a long period of time. So, we certainly have been able to reconnect and have the same energy and sort of have the same goals and aspirations for what we want to do. So that's been equally as good of fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's what absolutely jumps out at me is you drawing upon these connections from across your career of people you've worked with, you trust, how they work and that you get along. I think that's so important in a small business where you are going to be working much more closely. and particularly remotely across time zones, to have that sort of relationship already there that you don't have to start from scratch with someone.
Yeah, and I caught up with Claire. As said to you earlier, I went on a European holiday this year, which seems crazy when you started a business, just over a year ago. But I caught up with Claire in Rome, and we had lunch, and it felt like we hadn't, seen each other for a month, let alone sort of 11 years. So that was to me, that was a great testament to the relationship that you could sort of pick up and sort of leave off not long. You felt like it was a month ago.
Those friendships are so valuable, where you can spend months, years apart, and then just come back together, and it's like old days.
Absolutely.
Glenn, you working with large and small businesses. Sometimes businesses get going, a founder has an idea for a product and it just rockets. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of knowledge about that product, but they might not know how to run a business. How do you start that conversation with them about moving from founder mode to business mode?
I think it's can be different. I think some people are absolutely conscious of that and see that the opportunity is to bring in some different thinking. I think sometimes people, they want to keep control, they want to make the decisions. So I think it depends on the person and how much they're up for support.
Right.
I'll talk about it again, but storytelling is really powerful. So whether you can foresee something that's in front of them and share a story that might help them understand that a little better and put some context around it, I think is important. So for me, that storytelling and building the relationship, we've been working with a business in Geelong now, which has been a really exciting business. They've sort of got a growth target of close to doubling their sales over the next period of time.
Very big.
And they're, a mature, they're a decent sized business today. Wouldn't say they're mature, but they're up for the journey. So sort of building the relationship and building that trust over a period of time. We've been working with them for just over 12 months and it takes time. So, they're not going to trust you on month 1 like they trust you in month 12. So,
Sure.
And that's a mutual thing along the way. And we've hopefully been able to demonstrate benefit up front and been able to put some things in place where they can materially see a difference. And then once you sort of, work through that, then you can start to build on the things that you can also see that maybe they can't. So it's the trust factor is huge.
Yeah, and that's where your experience is so important, right? I've been here, I've been in this place before, and I can see what happens if we keep going this way.
Yeah, and I think, being able to share a story that they can put some context around versus you just saying you should do this because, of my experience. So being able to storytell is super important.
Yeah, look, as a consultant myself, it's mostly storytelling of, hey, like, we've been here before, I've seen this, this is what happens if, come and talk to Steve, he's been there and seen it too, and just building that relationship and trust is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glenn, you mentioned you've got a playbook for moving warehouses. What are the 3 key things that people should take into account, or what should people really be mindful of?
There's lots. I think if I was to sort of isolate down to a few, it's classic in and out. So it's being able to make sure that whatever you move out, that you move in, and so having the right inventory processes around that. I think being really clear on your timeframes is really important as well. So being able to have a clear plan, be able to deliver to that plan, particularly in a retail business where sales are king. And if that's moving an operation and you've got to shut down e-com for a few hours or a few days, where potentially there might be a gap in the customer, outcome.
Yep.
I think that's really important that you call those things out up early. And then if there needs to be change or needs to be sort of alignment further to have everybody on the same page, because you want you want to be able to deliver to a plan that everybody's bought into. So communication. And I think a lot of things, it just gets back to your enablers. So whether, trying to keep it as simple as possible, of whether that's ASNs and how you're moving stock from one, shed to another, making sure all those technical things line up. But then probably the only other thing that I could think of to make it 4 is not to introduce too much change.
Right.
So I think where I've seen moves go wrong is where you're trying to do multiple things at the one time,
Right.
rather than keeping it simple to a warehouse move. So and sometimes that's not possible. So if you're, sometimes moving a warehouse gives you the opportunity of, changing your 3PL, or if it's, being able to upgrade your solution from a WMS perspective or something along those lines. Wherever possible, keep it as narrow in scope as possible.
Yeah, I can see the introduction of scope creep becoming a real headache with trying to put in a new WMS at the same time whilst running an e-com, whilst moving stock, and suddenly it just becomes a disaster. So yeah, having that very tight scope, keeping it all together.
Yeah, and we did a big change at Cotton On in 2010 where we went from multiple warehouses into under one roof. We changed system and we changed structure at the same time. So certainly, I've got some war wounds to be able to share with people and ensure people don't take those missteps.
Yeah, you see these scars.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's one of the parts of being an experienced consultant, is being able to point to, hey, let's keep it tight. What else do you see when you walk into a business that's asked for help? Are they struggling with an outgrown ERP, wrong person in the wrong role? They don't know what their tech stack is. How do you get started?
I think we're generally brought in for probably a couple of different reasons. One is someone knows what to do but doesn't have the capacity. So we're sort of there to be a wedgie in terms of time and resource, and so we can play a role in that space. Or in a situation where they don't have the technical capability, so they don't understand what they're. So I think in both cases it's quite a different ask, and the role that we need to play. So I feel like in the secondary part where we're looking for technical support, whether that's going through a process of tender, or then certainly we can lean on our years of experience and our connections to build whatever that scope needs to be. So it's probably a matter of asking the questions up front early to ascertain what they're trying to achieve in that space. So if it's to, my system is end of life, we need to find a replacement solution, or I want best practice on freight negotiations. We can certainly play a technical role in that space. So typically see a combination of both, where people don't have capacity because, businesses are built these days and probably forever of being fairly efficient, and, so doing something that's transformational, is sometimes out of the capability of the team that are running the operation. And so, that I think both seem to be, where we feel like we've got an opportunity. And I think for us, we think we're a point of difference to other consultants because we're operators. We've lived it. We've eaten exactly what the teams are going through. So being able to sort of genuinely talk to experiences and talk to our capability, where we're a team of operational people, not a team of consultants.
Yeah. Real world experience goes a long way in these situations of being able to see the problems on the horizon before they become actual problems.
Yeah.
And so when you go into a business, you might find that the wrong individuals in the wrong place, or the wrong solutions in the wrong, they've outgrown it or something. How do you have those difficult conversations with someone who is, they've started a business, or they're just so busy that they don't have time to look at it?
I think it's a combination of being able to, if you think something's, on the critical path, then you need to face into those conversations that something's wrong and something needs to change. And I think if it's not, then it's how you sort of build the relationship, build the trust to be able to have those conversations down the track, because you don't necessarily have to face into it straight away. So I think it's a combination of, experiences and know-how and understanding to try and tackle those things along the way. But certainly, yeah, if there's a red flag that sort of stands out pretty early, then it's actually fairly easy conversation to have.
Right.
But it's then back on the person to do something with that piece of information. And we've seen people go, "Yep, no worries, we understand that," and then we've seen people that have gone, I'm going to choose to ignore that and run into the brick wall. So, and that's all you can do is point those things out.
Yeah, point out the brick wall.
Yeah.
Okay, your choice whether you wish to engage with the wall or go around the wall. And so you're in these conversations with businesses. They're all scrappy. They're trying to get going. They're in spreadsheets. It's all paper or hand to mouth, and you're trying to move them to that mature model, forecasting CapEx. Is that a financial conversation? Is it an education? How do you build up that capability?
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's being able to again storytell the journey of transition to those things and the benefits that those things can build. I think often, anything in IT is always considered to be a cost. I had a business quite recently that didn't actually apply a budget.
Right.
And so there was no budget for IT other than capturing the spend and making sure that it was no more than last year.
Right.
And I suppose the risk of that is that you never actually future plan, and you're not encouraging your people in any way to future plan. So being able to sort of go, okay, you're not going to spend the money. You still get an approval process on how you're going to spend the money and have a method, whether that's an IT steering meeting or an investment meeting or however you want to put those things in play. But being able to sort of go, okay, as a percentage of sales, our IT spend over the next 3 years is going to be X, Y, and Z. And our goal is, in year 4 to actually bring it down to the same level as what it is today. It could actually go, okay, we've got this hump over the next 2-3 years to build capability and use IT as an enabler. Yep. Versus, just having a methodology that we won't spend any more money than last year on IT because that's what we do.
Yep.
And so being able to say in 4 years' time, we'll be back to the same level. As we grow, we will sort of invest, ahead of time. And we might need to spend a bit more over the next few years to deliver that investment. But we will get back to where we were, I think is a positive story. So things like that is a way to demonstrate that putting a method in place will actually drive different behaviour from your team.
Yeah, everybody likes to work somewhere where they know there's investment and growth and they're not held back by, I guess, attitudes or budgets that are restrictive. So that would be beneficial not just in financial returns, but also employees feeling like it's going somewhere.
Yeah, and I think we've all lived and owned budgets. Most people enjoy a budget because they can be challenged on that. Now that might be a future budget. That's still that people can aspire to deliver that budget.
Yep.
It's just having a method that you're going to operate in.
So Glenn, what technologies are you seeing drive the best ROI or even the biggest ROI when you're having those forecasting conversations for sort of nascent businesses?
Yeah, I think, for me, what I'm seeing in the space I'm playing is certainly, technology in the space of supply chain is certainly one that I see over the next, 5 years. It's already started. I think there's some markets in the world that are more mature than others, but certainly, being able to tackle, pick productivity, replenishment, all those core processes that have been historically done by people are going to start to be done by robotics. And it won't be for everything, but certainly big big percentages of tasks can be done that way. I think some of the challenges is for logistics providers as well as retailers, and whether they choose to do their own distribution or they're using somebody else. Yep. They'll want to move into that space because that's where gains are. And I think probably it's going to be a combination of providers, making a few more dollars because they can charge a bit more, but also I think the competitive nature of the way that will head is that will ultimately be passed back to the retailer. So I think that's certainly a big opportunity that I see happening in the space, that I'm playing in. And I think from a general systems point of view, I think obviously the buzzword of AI and forecasting technologies that will emerge, that will help retailers that have been, like I think about my time with Cotton On and planning in different markets, whether that's the different weather between sort of, far north Queensland and Tasmania, versus, the tropics of, Southeast Asia, like America. You've got New York versus Florida, being able to be use a lot more inputs to deliver better forecasting outputs. Like you don't have to be a rocket scientist in AI to understand that that's all possible. So I see that being a big opportunity, not so much from a productivity point of view, but certainly from a forecast accuracy and being able to deliver a better experience and therefore drive sales as being a big opportunity.
Yeah, I see that businesses will get there. Prior to that, though, probably inventory accuracy needs to be a foundational element to drive that. Or you end up with worse decisions faster because of AI.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right that the enablers need to be in place. Otherwise, it's the classic story of crap in, crap out.
Crap in, crap out is right. I've often heard of, the ski jackets going to North Queensland and the board shorts to Tasmania because of a allocation mismatch. So I think AI will help in some regard, but there's still room for people to do a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think there's levels of AI. So it's how does better computing help a person make better decisions versus, all the information being sort of provided by a system.
Absolutely. There still needs to be a human oversight of decisions being made and processes being monitored.
Yeah, 100%.
Glenn, going to the other end of town, you consult with some very big home retailers that we would all know and appreciate. How are their challenges different to, I guess, the other end of the smaller retailers?
I think, it's interesting because I think their problems are the same. They're just a lot larger.
Right.
And I think, it's probably one thing that, probably when you're in an organisation that I was for 17 and a half years, you're not really looking outside too much.
Right.
And so you're not really getting an appreciation of how others are doing things. So when you do get to see sort of and see where other retailers are at, and they're hugely successful retailers, sometimes their supply chains aren't as good as what you think they might be.
Right.
And so again, it's the same challenges, in terms of where to spend capital, and retail is very much driven by, the front end of the business and, the customer experience. And so sometimes people are playing catch up. And I think sometimes, things have changed, where a retailer mightn't have had to play in the space of an omni world in the past, and something's changed, whether that's COVID or alike, it's changed the way that they have to behave.
Right.
And so sometimes making change in that space when you are a large retailer, they're large projects. There's lots of people and affected, and lots of people need to be involved in decision making. And so deciding to do a ERP implementation, or deciding to do a WMS or a TMS or an order management system project, they're big projects. Whereas when you're a small retailer, you can be far more agile. And so there's pros and cons to both. But certainly, one of the things that I've seen over my short period of in that world is, that there's certainly challenges in all supply chains.
Right. And I've seen that as well, the experience of working with an owner-founder who can make a decision and you can move the next day to implement something versus going through a steering committee and a CAB and a board approval to get spend for FY27. It can be a little frustrating at times, the speed to get things done.
Yeah, 100%. And, like I reflect on my time, in the roles that I was in over 17 and a half years, and our speed of execution early days was a lot faster than what it was, in the latter days. And I think, sometimes, I know I had a conversation about putting a second sorter in on the eve of COVID when, we had a sortation unit at our Avalon facility, and we made a decision to put a second one in basically, I think, February of 2020. That second sorter was imported from Europe and delivered before, October 2020.
Right.
And so we had our second sorter. So decisions can be made quickly. Again, it just gets back to return on investment, focus at the time, those sorts of things. So, I think I'm sure every CEO, COO in a mature business would love to operate in a much more agile way, but big business is big business.
Do you find your experience as a COO makes it easier to ask for spend or explain a project to a C-suite?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't think so. I think most by the time you get to that sort of position at that level, there's a formal methodology that someone's going to have to go through. And so sometimes I think sometimes you can get some projects across the line that don't need a lot of spend. But I think when it's something significant, it's still going to have to go through the rigor of a process.
Yeah. And so coming in as a vendor myself to a large retailer, what tips can you give me for putting together an offering or a package for them?
Well, I think it gets back to how do you deliver the benefit as quickly as possible. So and be able to be really clear on that. So I know for myself, it was always being able to, whether it was a project that had 4 phases and that phase 1 was going to deliver something pretty significant, and sometimes that's not possible, but if at all, be able to sort of tackle the biggest thing that's going to deliver the biggest benefit first, get confidence, get trust, and then obviously continue on the journey.
Right, the biggest thing for the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Glenn, retailer is stuck in operational chaos. Where should they start?
I hope they're not stuck in operational chaos, because it's not a good place to be. I think it's trying to create some capacity is probably the first thing. So how do you add some resource, add capacity to be able to sort of give yourself space to think is probably the first point of call. Whether that's a resource or whether that's outsourcing something to be able to deliver some extra capacity is probably the first thing. And then I suppose, being able to then step your way through what is your transformational sort of pathway to deliver not chaos.
Right.
So I think, it's being able to be clear then what to fix and when to fix it, and put a plan in place and just work towards it. There's no... I've been in many a situation where it has been chaos, and, until you get a bit of space, it's tough. And I think sometimes, like this time of the year, we're approaching Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like sometimes you just don't have the ability to create capacity for yourself because everyone's full, everyone's busy. So sometimes you just got to put one foot in front of the other until capacity sort of comes, because volume drops off. But that's not a great place to be. But if you can create some capacity for yourself to think and step through a plan and then obviously deliver that plan.
Right. And so that retailer has got a little bit of capacity now and they decide, I need to talk to Glenn. How should they get in touch with you?
Certainly through our website, which is orchardretailgroup.co. Or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn or mobile. Certainly happy to take anyone's call. And happy to jump on a call, come and see them, whatever it takes.
Fantastic. Glenn, thank you so much for your time today. I think we've covered so much ground from sort of the early days of Cotton On through to where you are now, and just hearing your story and the amount of wisdom that you have from your career in logistics and supply chain is really apparent to me. And I'll certainly be giving you a call if I get stuck somewhere. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate taking the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us today on LogiQ-On Talking Tech. It's been Simon Wile and Glenn Keast. And what a fantastic discussion about Glenn's experience at Cotton On Group, leading that change and transition over nearly 18 years, and now at Orchard Retail Group, helping small and large businesses thrive through their operations and growth. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to having you back again for our next episode.